about God. And we started the whole series off by saying that to deny the feeling of something more, something purposeful and intentional, is to insist that it's all random, accidental, and meaningless. That just doesn't work for most people at a soul level. And so we think that this is kind of just true of all of us, that there's something more when we talk about God. There's something that's going on inside of us that brings up all kinds of emotions and thoughts and feelings. And we looked at another guy named A.W. Tozer. He said, what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. So kind of setting the stage with those two thoughts, we said when we talk about God, we're having the most important conversations imaginable. The vision of Downtown Vegas, we want to create space, and Space Eds, where people can come and have discussions about life and faith, about God and what they believe, in a safe place that creates meaningful conversation for them. And so we believe when we talk about God, we're having the most important conversations imaginable. But when you have conversation, when you have discussion, you only really have words, right? You have words and metaphors, and it seems like words when you talk about God just fall short. Metaphors always feel a little incomplete. So we were trying to provide some language, some ideas around what we're talking about when we say the word God, and to help us understand what we're talking about when we talk about each other, to each other about God. And kind of our first idea that we discussed was that when we talk about God, we're discussing the source of all we feel to be true. We said that word feel, we kind of put a word on our crossword puzzle, was hum. And, a hum is an indicator of a source of something. And so we feel that it resonates inside of us that maybe there's something bigger, maybe there's something more. We said that the source of all we feel to be true, that's what we're talking about when we use the term God. And then last week we looked at a construct by a philosopher, theologian, modern guy. He's out right now writing books and talks and things like that, doing some interesting things, named Pete Rollins. And he kind of gives us this construct when we see God as symbolic, imaginary, and real, and how he tends to think about God and to talk about God when we have these conversations, and how we view God and how we think of God. And we said when we talk about God, we're discussing something personal yet transcendent or otherworldly or beyond. It's something that we're not going to understand. And that was our idea that we discussed last week. And I heard that from multiple tables there was some really amazing discussion that went on around a God that can be personal and transcendent at the same time. And we're going to talk some more about this. And so the first two ideas that we set up were really kind of an introduction to this grand series that we're talking about, all these thoughts. And so today I want to really kind of get into the meat of some discussion. And I really want to look into the Bible and say, okay, if there is this God, and he's personal and transcendent, he's the source of all we feel to be true, what does he say about himself, and how has he interacted with human beings throughout history? And so I want to look into the Bible for that. And sometimes people go, yeah, but the Bible, and there's a lot of controversy around it, right? Like some people think that the Bible is a scientific and historical textbook. I read that on Twitter recently, and I was like, no, it's probably not a great way to read it and to look at the Bible. And other people are like, well, it tells you how to be a good person, right? Basic instructions before leaving Earth. But that kind of falls incomplete as well. And so I want to look at the Bible and understand it in this way, that the Bible is the story of an ever-expanding awareness of God and how human beings might relate to the divine. It's the story of God and humans and their interaction. It is the story of that relationship, and what does that look like? That awareness, and what does that look like? And it's an ever-growing, expanding awareness of who God is. And how can we relate to him as human beings? Because I'm sure all of us have felt that, well, if there is a God out there, that's great. I'm not saying there's not, but I don't know how I would ever relate to him. I think the Bible shows us exactly what that is like. And the earliest people, when we look into the Bible and we see their interactions with God, we see their relationship to God, a lot of what you'll find is kind of this very ancient mindset that there is a God who is for us. For us. I think this is kind of where it begins when we relate, when we grow in conscious awareness of who God is. We see God as for us. Now, a lot of times, as we talked about last week in the God of the symbolic, this was kind of a banner that just God is for us, which means he's against them. And so people would go into battle, or they would go into conflict with the idea that God's on our side, so he's not on their side. And it oftentimes was used as a banner to kind of just sweep across, saying that we're right, they're wrong. But again, I think that was because the awareness needed to expand and to grow a little bit. People need to understand, if God is for us, what does that actually mean? And I'll tell you that today, I want everyone here to understand this idea. This is what we're going to discuss. And when we talk about God, we're discussing a God who's on our side. I think that if we can grasp and understand that there's this God who's personal and transcendent, the source of all we know to be true, all we feel to be true, and if he is on our side, and we can believe that and can understand that, it changes our life. It changes our mindset. It changes our world. We can understand that God is on our side. So, we're going to look into the Bible. We're going to look into a letter. It was a letter to the Hebrews. And this was to Hebrew Christians, or Jewish Christians. Okay, to people that were Jewish. And we see that that's pretty much the Old Testament is kind of the scriptures, the ancient texts of the Jewish people, their laws, their interactions with God. And so there's a letter in the New Testament where it's writing to Hebrew Jewish people to encourage them to now follow Jesus, thinking that Jesus was everything that was talked about in the Old Testament actually was just pointing to Jesus, and then to Hebrew Christians to encourage them in their faith as they followed Jesus, because they were very countercultural. If you were in a Jewish community and now you follow this Jesus, this is actually very countercultural, and this would cause a lot of problems when the government would come in to persecute, to kill, to arrest Christians. Jewish people were known to tell on their Jewish counterparts that had become Christians, right? They would turn on them. So this was written in the midst of these kinds of turmoil. We're not sure exactly who wrote it. Some people believe the Apostle Paul, who we talked about a few weeks ago, looked at some of his writings. Other people believe that there was this guy by the name of James, who was Jesus' brother, and he actually was the pastor of the church in Jerusalem, and which was largely Jewish Christians. So many people believe that possibly he wrote this. No one kind of attaches their name to it. But we see in this letter kind of a lot of Jewish history in this, and kind of understanding this unfolding, this expanding view of God based on this Jewish history. And so we're going to kind of look at the end of a chapter, and then we're going to kind of go back to the beginning, sort of maybe like Tarantino style. We're going to see the ending first, and then we're going to kind of look up at the rest of it. And we're going to look at what is the response of people that understand that God is on their side, that God is for them. So, we're good. It says, all these people earned a good reputation. So, clearly we're going to see some stories about some people who earned a good reputation because of their faith. Yet none of them received all that God had promised, for God had something better in mind for us, so that they would not reach perfection without us. And so the idea is, the writer here is saying that God had something for us. Now, who's the us? Right? Is it just Jewish people? Is it just Jewish Christians? Is it who he was writing to at the time? It doesn't expand further than that. I really think in the context of the Bible as a whole, what we find as a God who's for us is, yes, he's for the Jewish people we see in the Old Testament. And yes, he's for Christians and those who follow him in faith today. I would say anyone who's following Jesus in faith. But then he's also for the world. We see that all throughout the Bible as well. And he is for people who have been made in his image. And God is for us as human beings. And so I want to look at what the stories were that he was talking about here, that the writer was talking about, and look at these people and kind of just examine the response. How do we respond to God being on our side? If God is on our side, if he's for us as human beings, how do we respond to this personally transcendent God who is for us? So, let's go back to the beginning of this chapter. What it says. So faith is the confidence that what we hope for will actually happen. It gives us assurance about things we cannot see. Through their faith, the people in days of old earned a good reputation. By faith, we understand the entire universe was formed at God's command. That what we now see did not come from anything that cannot be seen. It was by faith that Abel brought a more acceptable offering to God than Cain did. So Abel, very beginning of the Bible, in Genesis, we see this early on, this was before the Jewish people had even been formed. This author goes all the way back and looks at a guy by the name of Abel. That Abel's offering gave evidence that he was a righteous man, and God showed his approval of his gifts. Although Abel was long dead, he still speaks to us by example of his faith. It was by faith that Enoch, so we have this other guy, Enoch, very, very interesting story. It was someone who was said to he walked with God. When we talk about spiritual life being this journey, he was someone who walked with God. He had this intimate relationship with God. It says that Enoch was taken up to heaven without dying. He disappeared because God took him. Before he was taken up, he was known as a person who pleased God. That was his reputation. And look at this verse that is very key. And it is impossible to please God. Not improbable. Impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. And in this verse shows us two aspects of what faith actually is. It's belief and behavior. Faith is belief and behavior. You cannot have faith without action. And so the response to a God who is for us is action. It's not just belief. And faith kind of admits that, hey, you're not going to know all the answers. We talked about last week with God being transcendent. The writer said, it's impossible to know all the ways of God. He's otherworldly. He's beyond us. But yet he's personal in the fact that he's told us about himself. And in these stories, the people that they're talking about, God was for them. And we see that they benefited from a God that was for them because they acted in faith. They moved forward not knowing the whole story. And you go, yeah, but maybe these were just a certain kind of people, right? The Bible talks about men, and it kind of excludes a lot of other people. No. If you look back in this chapter, you'll see men and women. You'll see people who were shepherds, and you'll see people who grew up in a house. You'll find a prostitute from another country that exercised her faith. She acted in belief in God. And she had a good reputation because of it. You'll find people of all kinds. You'll find people from the smallest, most insignificant families. You'll find oldest children. You'll find youngest children. You find people all over the spectrum. And what we understand is when they exercise their faith, they realize that God is for me. He's on my side. And I think that if we can understand, if we can have this just basic conscious awareness that there's this God who's the source of everything we feel to be true, and he's on my side, he is for me, it might change the way we live out what we say and believe. Because God is no longer this faraway thing that we can't understand, that we can't relate to. No, he's on our side. He loves us. He's rooting for us. Like that mentor, coach, teacher that you talked about in your group in the icebreaker. That person that, I was a teacher and a coach and a mentor of a small group leader in a church, and I had kids in my school that were experiencing me as all three. We became very close. But when I first was in that role in their life, they would have told you, this guy hates me. Right? And it always seemed like I was for them. Everything I did and said didn't always make sense to them, but as they matured and as our relationship grew, what they began to understand is, wait, this guy is actually for me. I didn't even realize. The response was they began to trust me. They began to when I coached, and I said, hey, I think this is a great way to do this thing. They actually believed me and would act accordingly. I think the same is true in our relationship with God. Martin Luther King said, faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. And I think a lot of people struggle with faith because they just want to know all of the answers before they commit to something. That's not what faith is. When it's with our business or our passion, we're putting stuff out there, we're behaving in a way, something we don't know if this business is going to work, or if this thing is going to work that we're trying to do in our life. We have faith and we act accordingly. We hope that it will happen, but when it comes to God, sometimes I think we really struggle because we're like, just give us all the answers. We just want to know. But faith is going, you know what? I don't know all the answers. I'm never going to fully understand this God. But He's on my side. He's for me. And so today, what we're going to discuss is that when we talk about God, we're talking about a God who is on our side. No matter who we are, as a human being made in the image of God, He is for us. He may not be for your worldview entirely. He may not be for all the things that you are for.